Shlach. Was I thirsty? Am I thirsty? Am I thirsty?
Amen.
Was I thirsty? Was I thirsty? Complain. This week's Parshah, unfortunately, is another series of complaints from Bnei Israel. But we can learn a lot because we say they weren't perfect. They were imperfect, but we're going to reach perfection through them. So in Shlach, Hashem tells Moshe, send the meraglim, send spies, okay? The word is lator, and anyone knows the word in English that sounds like lator? How about taking lator of Europe, or lator of Israel? Lator is similar to the word tor. They were asked to spy and to go look around and check it out. And there were questions they asked. Unfortunately, they came back with a negative report. Actually, they reported accurately, but in the end, they gave it a negative spin. So, of course, Moshe was aware that it was going to be a very precarious situation. He sent very worthy, righteous people because he knew it could be a challenge, but yet he was worried about Hosea, and he gave him the name Yehoshua. He added the Yud. Now, where did that Yud come from? Way back, there was Sarai, and her name was Sarai. It was changed to Sarah. He took the Yud, and it was added. I say nothing disappears. It's like weight. When one person loses weight, another person gains the weight. So somewhere the Yud is floating around, and somewhere your weight is floating around. But it was to give him the strength. Why did he need strength? Because he was a very humble person. Humility is an outstanding trait, but sometimes there's peer pressure. Sometimes you want to make everyone happy. You know the rabbi, they said, you're right. The other man said, but what about this? He said, you're right. He said, but two people can't be right. He says, you're also right. So that's the bottom line. Everybody is right. You can't all be right. They said the Beis Hamikdash, in a sense, was destroyed because everybody can't be right. What happened was, we have the story of Kamsa Bar Kamsa. A man was very unhappy. He wasn't invited to a party, so he went and told the Roman general. He said, give a sacrifice, but the Jewish people won't accept it. So the Roman general sent a perfect, unblemished sacrifice. This man, this rebel, took this sacrifice, blemished it, and then they brought it to the Beis Hamikdash. So they said, what are we going to do? Some rabbi said, let's sacrifice it. Others say, we can't. One man said, we can't sacrifice it. If we sacrifice it, they'll think we could do blemished sacrifices. They said, okay, so let's kill this man. They said, we can't kill him either, because then they'll think the punishment for sacrificing of blemished animals is to be killed. So because he couldn't make a decision, because he wouldn't stand on principle, the whole Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. You have to stand on principle. And it's also about perspective. It says that they looked at it and they said, we were like grasshoppers in their eyes. They talked about the fruit as if they were mutant fruits instead of appreciating. They saw funerals that were happening, the meraglim, the spies, and they said, this is a land where it eats its people, everybody dies, not knowing that truly Hashem did this. He created the funerals so that there would be less people noticing the meraglim. The fruit were unusually good because it's a land that is so full of bracha, so full of blessing. So what does it come down to? It comes down to what we call perspective, how you look, how you look. It's almost like you can see the good in it, you can see the negative in it. You have to see the positivity in everything. They say there was a man, he was sent out, he was a shoe salesman, and they sent him to a foreign country, and he came back and he said, don't send shoes. There are 15,000 people here, and they all run around barefoot. They don't need shoes. The next week, another salesman went, he said, send me 15,000 pair of shoes. He says, why? There are 15,000 pair of men going around barefoot. There's so much opportunity to sell shoes. So it's all how you see it. They said there's even, we always say, is the glass half full or half empty, the optimist. Usually you say the optimist says it's half full, right? Mm-hmm. Except this little boy was sitting there and he was telling Mommy, yippee, my glass is half empty. Why? Because he hated milk and he had to drink it. So depending on where you're coming from, half empty could be very good. But anyway, it's all about our perspective. And also they did not learn about Lashon Hara. Miriam, the Parshah before, she spoke evil. Not evil, but she spoke about her brother in a way that she shouldn't have. And they should have learned the lesson of Lashon Hara, speaking negatively. It's very important to speak positively. It's how you view things, how you see it. They said also sometimes, what were the meraglim? What was their mistake? They saw things as they thought they saw them, in their own way. And sometimes we see things or we hear things the way we want to hear them or the way they want to see them. They said there was this man once, of course, a Jewish tzaddik sitting in a prison, and there was a bird, and it says, "Run, Ruvain, run, run, Ruvain, run." And he thought that was what the bird was saying. But then he asked the other prisoner, and the other prisoner wasn't really anybody special. He said, "Did you hear that?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Run, Ruvain, run." He said, "Why did he ask him?" Because sometimes we think we hear what we want to hear. So he just wanted to verify that he was going to hear what he wants to hear. But we have to have this self-esteem. It all comes down to self-esteem. It says, we were grasshoppers in our eyes, and we were also grasshoppers in their eyes. In other words, because they viewed themselves as grasshoppers, yes, there was a land full of giants, and they could have felt that way. But if you have self-esteem, if you feel good about yourself, if they knew it wasn't up to them, it was up to Hashem, that's what it was. It wasn't logical that the land could be conquered, and they did calculations that it wasn't supposed to be conquered yet, and they miscalculated, and they thought that it was up to them to conquer the land, but it's illogical. But logic is beyond Hashem. It says, we think that Hashem could only help us do the big things. Everyone raise your hand. Oh, wow. Simon says raise your hand. So you think you did it, but if I said, could you move this piece of furniture? You'd say, well, it's too big, too heavy. You can't even lift your hand without Hashem. So it's really about Hashem doing it. We have to look at ourselves and know that we were created in God's image, like the king and the prince. If you walk around and everyone says, wow, you look so much like your father, the prince, or the king, or your mother, the princess or the queen, and I'll speak for my mother. Now they all say I look like my mother. That's wonderful. So I have to act like her. I emulate her. But we have a certain, it's called stature. And if you think of the word, state your, S-T-A, you just rearrange the letter, it's the state you're in. It's how you view yourself. That's what stature is. So it's about being positive, speaking well about it. And unfortunately, 40 days they were there, so they were punished for 40 years. And that was the punishment. The Parshah also speaks, quickly I'll finish up, it says about challah. We're all women of the challah. And why is it called challah? Challah was not the actual, what we eat is not actually challah, but the first of the kneading, the first of our best at first is always given to the Kohanim. And it was taken from there, and that piece that they took was called challah. But because we're so excited about the mitzvah, we continue to commemorate the mitzvah by calling it challah. And another interesting thing is when they talk about Hashem, Moshe says to them, a good lesson in life, there's Yehoshua and Kalev, right? Yehoshua, of course, right away speaks up for Moshe and says, this land is good, we could do it. But Kalev is a little smarter, and he says something like, who is this Moshe anyway? So all the people think that Kalev is on the side of them, that they think, okay, they're going to say all this negativity. But he starts off that way. First, he wins over the people by acting as if he's validating what's going on, and then he presents all the other arguments. It teaches there was once this, it's an important lesson, there was once this nobleman, very terrible Gentile nobleman, and he had these Jewish people, a son, a daughter, and little boys, pulling his wagon instead of horses. And it was terrible. And he was like almost whipping them. This great tzaddik was standing by, and he walks over, and he sees the nobleman's son in the carriage. He wipes his face, he makes nice, he kisses him, he says, your son is so beautiful, such a handsome young man. He says, you know what, I'm afraid that for him to see these people being treated this way will emotionally tarnish him. So why don't you, maybe not let him see this. So the nobleman stopped the Jewish people from pulling it. But it just shows sometimes we have to validate, we have to listen, we have to make people feel we're on their side. And after we do that, then we can give our input. Then we can say our opinion, and then we can hope to win them over. So this is what he did. That was Kaleb's approach. Unfortunately, neither worked. There was a plague. And then we learn about different karbanos, and then again about challah, that we give out challah, and the mitzvah of challah. And then it ends with the parsha with tzitzis. Why tzitzis? Because tzitzis has the same words. They talk about uri'item, you will see, and at the beginning of the parsha we started uri'isem, you saw the land. Both times, this juxtaposed with this one. How are we supposed to look at the land? They look negatively. When they see the tzitzis, you're supposed to think the color is blue on the tzitzis. You think of the sky, the blue sky, then you think of Hashem, you think of the kisei hakavod, the chair, and you're supposed to raise yourself to a higher level. So this is what tzitzis does. Also, the idea of tzitzis, it has 600 is the gematria for tzitzis, 8 are the threads, and 5 are the knots. Quickly, 600 and 8 and 5 is 613, all the mitzvahs. So we think of all the mitzvahs. Also, it goes again to the heart and the eye. What the heart wants, the eyes covet. Very often that's what happens. So the whole thing with the Meraglim, with seeing the Israel, is they saw it, their eyes misread it because they wanted something else. They were biased. You know when they say a skirt is cut on a bias? Did anyone ever realize? It's cut on the angle. You see it from your own angle. So the Nesiim, these men, these powerful men, thought that once they got to Eretz Yisrael, they would lose their power. So they didn't see it the right way. They were afraid, or they thought they'd be better off in the midbar. Whatever it was, this is what happened. So tzitzis, every mitzvah, so many mitzvahs, they said this route. Men are not allowed to leave that tzitzis showing within a certain amount of cubits, a certain amount of feet from a grave. Why? Because while you're alive, you can do the simplest mitzvah. The simplest mitzvah. And when you're no longer here, you can't do it. So the person in the ground can't do the mitzvah. So you're not allowed to sort of in their face. So we should remember, while we're here, we should do mitzvahs. We should look at everyone with a positive spin. We should see the best in other people, speak nicely, have a positive attitude, and everyone should have a wonderful Shabbos, and we should all be zocha to go to Eretz Yisrael and see the land in all its beauty.
Amen. Thank you.